was chosen out of all of the national poetry winners from all over the country. 5 were chosen by the White House to be national student poets. So there she is at the White House with the First Lady when she won her award. And Michaela, this is other than her walking across stage and me giving her awards, this is the first time we've actually met, but I've known her name because this is my 4th year doing it, and I think you have won awards all 4 years, so she's a name that's constantly up on my spreadsheets. She has won a national award 3 years in a row, so she probably knows more about these awards than I do, and can give you a much different perspective, and not only is she here to talk about the awards, but also share some of the work that she won for. So Michaela, take it away.
All right. Thank you for the introduction. No pressure. I am Michaela. I graduated from Carlisle just a few short weeks ago. And I'm going to Vassar College in the fall to study English and literature, and probably theater, and possibly international relations. I'm still figuring that out. But I'm a lot of things. In addition to being a writer, I'm an actor, I'm a student, I'm a soccer player, I have a horse farm, and I love all that stuff. But what I'm here to talk to you today is my role as a national student poet. For those of you, you just got a pretty good introduction of the Scholastic Art and Writing Awards, and you can become a national student poet by entering your work in the Scholastic Art and Writing Awards. The way that it works is you enter poetry, and I won a gold key at the regional level, went on to the national level and won a gold medal there. The silver and gold medalists at the national level are then sent to a jury of poets and writers. Some names you might know, Kimiko Han, Joy Harjo, Andrea Gibson, and others who then narrow us down to about 40, 50 semifinalists. And then we had to send in kind of audition videos is how I thought of it, because actor. And then they narrowed it down to the 5 of us. So this was right before our appointment in September. And we met the First Lady that weekend. But so National Student Poets has been obviously a really cool honor for me, but it's more than just a resume point. And it's more than just the scholarship that came along with it. It is a year-long commitment and a year-long responsibility to a year of service as a literary ambassador to the region. And so being from Carlisle, Pennsylvania, I represent the Northeast region, which is very populous, very diverse, and so my year has definitely reflected that. I spent a couple days in April in Vermont, and I did a workshop with English language learners at a middle school who are from all over the world who had moved to Vermont. I did a workshop with inmates at a women's correctional facility who write like anyone else. I did workshops on protest poetry with high schoolers in Vermont. In addition to that, I've done virtual workshops. I've done workshops at college campuses, and I've also gotten the opportunity to read my work at the places like Lincoln Center in New York, at the Poetry and the Creative Mind Gala, where I met my heroes, Tina Fey and Meryl Streep, and Patrick Stewart, and he's really cool. And these are all people who love and appreciate poetry, and were willing to give their time to it, and were willing to talk to me about it, and I mean, who am I? So obviously poetry has taken me a lot of places this year, but one of the most important places it took for me was my service project. And my service project this year, in addition to all these events all these events kind of haphazardly around the region, we are given the support of National Student Poets to design and execute our own service projects in our own communities. So that was backstage at Lincoln Center. Yeah. So I was able to design a 6-week workshop series for military children at Carlisle Barracks. I am an Army brat myself. My father retired as a lieutenant colonel, and my mother retired just 2 weeks ago as a colonel, and my sister is ROTC right now. So we have a long history of the military in my family, and poetry has always kind of been the way that we connect to each other. My grandfather, when he was in Vietnam, used to send back lines of poetry in his letters that made him think of home, or he would record himself so that my family could hear his voice when he was gone. And so when my mom deployed to Iraq, she did the same thing for me and my sister, and she left us tapes of her reading Robert Frost and these long epic poems, and we would listen to them and know that that was the sound of her voice, even though she wasn't there. So poetry has always had that kind of connection for me, but I never really thought about writing it before. It's crazy that I've had so many opportunities because of poetry this year, but I didn't really start writing poetry until 2 or 3 years ago. I actually started off as a personal essayist. Well, actually, I started off writing short fiction. That was really bad short fiction because it was about a girl who looked like me and talked like me and lived in a town like me and did all the things that I did. And I had this smart teacher who was like, you know, I think this girl is you, and maybe you should just write about you, and then it will sound honest. I was like, you know what, that's a great idea. So I started writing personal essays as a way to remember and a way to make sense of it all. And so my process really took me from personal essays into poetry, but I have one of the personal essays as an example that I wrote about my experience as an Army brat, and this was in my portfolio this year, which I won a National Silver Medal for and some scholarship for that as well. But this is my essay, The Things We Carry, which some of you might have read Tim O'Brien's The Things They Carried, which is about what soldiers in Vietnam carried into battle with them. And so this is The Things We Carry. We carry their letters in our backpacks. We encase them in plastic, try to catch the grains of sand that slip from the seams under stamps. In the late afternoon, after slogging through school, we dig through our homework for these buried deserts, spend an hour or two sifting through layers of cursive undertones. They never speak of war, except in miss yous and be home soons. Instead, they offer poetry and platitudes, advice that arrives a week too late. We press the gritty envelope flaps to our tongue, wonder if this is what they taste before they brush their teeth at night. We carry the love they use to sign their letters, hold it like a Bible to our chests, and dare God to intervene. We carry what we have been taught to carry: batteries, sewing kits, pens, pencils, erasers, wristwatches, maps. We carry paranoia, the back to the wall, where are the exits, how many people are in this room twitching that clutters cheap diner tables. We carry pocket knives and twine. We carry an eye for anomaly, an ear for alarm, and a survivalist instinct that buries itself in our guts. We carry each other, holding on to friendships with the ferocity of knowing that we carry even more goodbyes. We carry our bag and our shoes to the gym, where people say, have a good workout, like it's have a good Christmas. We unpack the gifts of our bodies on machines and tracks and benches, carrying the weight of the knowledge that self-sufficiency is strength. Textbooks, calculators. We carry libraries from house to house, making the smallest cardboard boxes the heaviest ones. Notebooks, binders, mugs of late-night coffee. We carry hours of study in bags under our eyes. We work so that our parents will have one less thing to worry about. We carry the wanting to do more than make our parents proud. The harder, sharper wanting to make ourselves proud. We carry that pride. We carry intimate knowledge of the biology of transplantation and the physics of a bullet. We carry the practice of statistics, the rate of increase from 1,000 to 2,000 to 3,000, percentage times 3 tours times 30 years equals X before retirement. The probability that it will be somebody we know. The probability that it will be our somebody. The knowing that there are things worse than death. We carry coffins and couches with equal force but different gravity. We carry questions.
more than the paradox of a countdown clock that keeps adding time or the problem of a map without title or key. We carry who, what, when, where, why like a piercing on our tongue. Use it to tap out messages against our teeth, the things we're afraid to ask. How many movie theater discounts does it take to buy back a childhood? We carry our silence in mouths chewed raw from lack of speaking. We carry stones, smooth and flat, picked up along the road to place on Grandpa's grave. It's hard to find him. Another uniform white slab among rows of thousands, pristine and regimented as ever. He is black-lettered and not yet fading, sandwiched between an immigrant and an 18-year-old. We walk home carrying the need to write a poem for every gravestone. We carry the aunts and sons, the bookworms, the runners, the painters, politicians, the pacifists, the philosophers, sweethearts, the parents who lie here. We carry the veterans lying on city street corners, those who never made it home. We carry the sisters, the cousins, the brothers that stand in their place. When the time comes, we too will carry the torch. We wear helmets made of stoic steel and lined with hope. We carry safety pins like bad habits and dog tags like talismans. We carry dandelions in our hands and countries on our backs. We carry on. So I started writing personal essays. That one is a little bit more recent, but definitely I wrote about my military experience from a young age because it profoundly impacted my life and the way that I look at the world. And I found when I was writing these essays that I was using all these poetic devices because poetic devices make for good writing. And it's kind of a coincidence that that happens. And so I thought to myself, wow, Michaela, your prose is using a lot of poetic devices. Why don't you just write poetry? Because, I mean, you guys hopefully understood what I was trying to say with that essay and the things that we carry as military children, but it took 5 minutes and my voice got a little hoarse, whereas poetry is so short and so concise that it can be taken with you, it can be passed along easily in a letter. I mean, there are long epic poems as well, so that's not a fair generalization, but I can read 30 poems in a night, and I can read only about a quarter of a book. So I just found that I could do more with poetry in a shorter amount of time in my hectic schedule. And so I started writing poetry. How many poets are in the room? Bravo, bravo, bravo. So I would encourage all of you guys to, even if you don't see yourself as a poet yet, to make poetry a part of your daily life. And if not a part of your daily life, at least a part of your writing practices. The way I see it is, as a soccer player, I see poetry as when you go into practice, you do drills for specific things. You do drills to shoot at the goal. You do drills to pass in the midfield. And all of that makes you better at the game. So poetry is kind of like the drills that even if you aren't putting together a finished poem, the practice of creating poetry will enhance your writing. Just in the fact that it makes you write concisely, it makes you write very concretely, and it makes you be direct in a very short space of time. So I really started trying to condense these essays into poems, and this is an example of one such experience. I write a lot about my mom's deployment to Iraq because it came at a very formative time in my life. I was 10 years old, and my sister was 13, and we both were going through life as young teenage girls, and so it definitely was a formative time in my life. But with my mom's retirement this summer, it felt like that was kind of ending. So I wanted to encapsulate this kind of parallelism between her coming home from Iraq and her retiring in this poem. So this is called Redeployment. For my mother on the occasion of her retirement from the U.S. Army. The plane's wheels kiss the tarmac and hesitate. pulling back achingly before pressing themselves against it again, sighing with an almost shudder when the landing gear bows under the weight of 1,000 anxious stares, their eyes focused, squinting from where they were told to stand, practicing patience with the ringing and unringing of hands and the quiet urgency of prayer, their lungs wanting air and the 5-minute forever of before. Then the plane stops, and the door opens wide, revealing the sudden relief of the sound of soldiers stepping outside as one by one. Then all at once they march toward the gate. There, a little girl waits, lurching from left to right, trying to catch sight of her soldier through the crowd, standing on her father's shoulders to get a better view, and everyone searches through the glaring light of noon for their own familiar faces, all maintaining ranks until finally one lunges to embrace his son. Then the whole group runs together, moving in slow motion through the loudness of banners and cheers, and she appears. Now striding by herself across the seemingly endless divide, but pausing in the process, inexplicably turning aside for one final look at the plane that delivered her here. Back to the children she loves with her life, and the country she loves like a child, before pivoting around with a smile and floating, uninhibited, into the open arms of home. So once I started poetry, it really became all-encompassing for me. And one of the ways that I keep plugged into poetry that you guys can do as well is the Academy of American Poets has a service called Poem a Day, which you can register for on their website. It will send you a poem every morning. And it's interesting for me, it's kind of like a horoscope. And I personally don't believe in horoscopes, but I get these poems in the morning, and I have this poem and I reflect on it through the day. And sometimes it's interesting how your life throughout that day will enhance the meaning of the poem, or the poem will enhance your life. So I would definitely recommend that, especially if you have a smartphone or anything, you can carry it around with you literally all day. Also, if you have a smartphone, the Poetry Foundation has an app that you can browse by mood, you can browse by poet, you can type in, I'm feeling, this today, and I want a poem that reminds me of this. I really want to read a poem about coats, and you type in the word coats, and it'll bring like 50 poems. And so that's a great way to pass the time, a great way to stay connected to literature that way. Also, the National Student Poets has a Facebook page where we post prompts, we post stuff about what we've been doing, so that can keep you connected through there. And I really feel like poetry is kind of a mindset. I always say that inspiration is mostly about observation, and especially, I think that's especially true of poetry, that a poet is an observer. And so I can collect things throughout my travels throughout the day and write them down on my phone, like lines, pictures of graffiti. I love graffiti, and I really want to write a graffiti poem, but I haven't figured out how it's going to happen yet. But I have all these pictures of graffiti and all these graffiti paintings that I know will be useful one day. And I have a lot of stuff like that, and you guys can too. Just write down something. It can just be a line, and you never know how it might influence something later on. I listen to NPR a lot too, and sometimes I'll write down things that the stories remind me of, and that's how some of the poetry that got me nominated for this award started, is with lines from NPR stories. So it's interesting how just having the poetic mindset can help you collect all these lines and these images to use later on, and your subconscious kind of helps you figure that out. So that's the first part, is making poetry a part of your writing experience, making it a part of your daily life if possible, but definitely make it a part of your process. And the second thing that I've really learned from this year is the power of putting yourself out there. We as writers can often be very introverted and very shy and very nervous, or we can be loud, but either way, sometimes it's hard to promote yourself, and it's hard to be, I deserve to be published. And you do. And I'm sure you've created so much fantastic work over this summer, and I'm sure you have more left to create. And I would encourage you to find places to put those. The Scholastic Art and Writing Awards is a great start, but there are also websites for teen literature. There are other publications that you can look into. Your school might have their own literary anthology. If not, you can start one. That's what I did my junior year. You might have a school newspaper. You might have your own town newspaper. One of my favorite quotes, and I can't really remember where it comes from, is don't let anybody tell you that you're too young, because even a baby shark is still a shark. So just go into that with that mindset that you might be a baby shark or a teenage shark, but you're still a shark. And sharks swim and you write, and writers should pursue publication and put yourself out there and follow up on it. If you want it, go and get it. So the third thing that I've really come to appreciate this year is use your talent to give back to your community. My service project that I touched on briefly before was a prime example of that. I always believed that you should strive to be the person you needed when you were younger. I know that I needed somebody who would have brought me to poetry earlier and showed me that it was something that I could create and express myself honestly, and something that didn't have to follow all of the rules, and something that would help me connect to other people. And so I tried to be that for this generation of young military kids. So I went to the Carlisle Barracks Child and Youth Services and I said, hey, I want to start a poetry workshop series. What can we do about that? And it's surprisingly easier than you would think to come up with your own workshop series. Project Voice, I don't know if any of you know, Sarah Kay and Phil Kay are some spoken word artists that you should definitely look up. But they have this thing called Project Voice that is all about teaching poetry and teaching how to teach poetry. So if you look at their website, they have guides to workshops that you can lead and workshops for you. So I would definitely look into that. There are so many more opportunities. Maybe your church does a Sunday school or something and you can bring poetry or you can bring writing into that. Maybe you have a YMCA that does an after-school program or a summer program that you can bring yourself into that and bring writing into that. I found, especially with younger kids, sometimes they really appreciate having a teenager there teaching because it's kind of more comfortable than an adult for a lot of shy little kids. And it's also, you know, you're cool and you're older, so you can be that with them. And so definitely just pursue those opportunities, find them. I have a feeling that you guys as storytellers know how powerful it is to help tell someone's story or to tell a story about someone that empowers them, or that at least stories provide an empathetic link between people because it helps you see the world from somebody else's perspective. And that's probably the most powerful thing about being a storyteller. And you guys are learning that, you're learning how to be storytellers, but it's important that you also help other people learn how to tell their own story. And you guys have the talent and you have the ability to do that, so I would definitely encourage you to pursue that and to help other people learn to be as great storytellers as you are and tell their own story so that they can get themselves heard and maybe affect some positive change. So I'll leave you with that and with one last poem, which is from a trio of poems that I wrote from the perspective of female characters in Greek mythology. And so this is Calliope, who's a muse of poetry, and this is kind of my Ars Poetica. But I don't know, I always say that I'm not ready to write an Ars Poetica yet because I feel like I'm not ready for that yet, but one day. Anyway, this is Calliope Studies Stars. I kept your haikus, my favorite part of you. I hoard these drops of amber, these microcosms of the past, tucked in a drawer for safekeeping. You saw them as penny nothings, worthless in their ubiquity. You threw out 17 syllables, and I preserved poetry. To me, they are time capsules, or stars, flashing a message through the vacuum of time in intergalactic Morse coding. Hi, this was us. Do you remember? Thanks.
All right, so now if you have questions for Michaela, if you have
Yeah.
questions for me, whether it be about her writings, whether it be scholastic, go ahead.